Welcome to Christian Podcast, where we look at the world and our own lives through a Christian lens. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something that's really making waves in finance and tech. It's the rise and future of stablecoins. So, our goal here is to unpack what these stablecoins actually are, look at their impact, the challenges too, and crucially, how we can understand all this through the lens of Christian wisdom and biblical principles. Because, in the often wild world of digital assets, stablecoins aim for something pretty different: stability. They're designed to keep a constant value, acting as a sort of bridge between, let's say, traditional money and the crypto market. But as we'll see, it's complicated, and there are definite ethical tests involved.
That's exactly right. I mean, when you think crypto, stable isn't usually the first word that springs to mind, is it?
Yeah.
Bitcoin, for example, it's famous for those huge price swings. Stablecoins, though, they're built differently. They aim to hold steady, usually pegged one-to-one to an existing asset. Most often, that's the US dollar. But you see euros, sometimes even gold. You can almost think of them like casino chips for the crypto world.
Oh, I like that analogy, casino chips. So instead of going straight from dollars to, say, Bitcoin, you swap dollars for a stable coin like Tether, USDT, or maybe USD coin, USDC, and then use those to trade. Seems simpler.
It really does simplify things. There's a crypto investor, Glenn Goodman, who points this out. For any market to work well, you need liquidity. Things need to move smoothly. And trying to move money directly from traditional bank accounts, fiat currencies like dollars, into crypto, it could be slow, it costs fees, it's just a hassle. Stablecoins kind of solve that. Quick, cheap transfers. It makes a huge difference for market liquidity, market efficiency. It just helps the whole digital asset world function better.
Okay, that definitely highlights why they're useful. But if they're all about being stable, why do we hear about controversies sometimes? Are there different kinds? Do some of them, fail on that promise?
They absolutely can fail. And yeah, there are basically two main types, and each has its own risks. The first kind, probably the easier one to grasp, are fiat-backed stablecoins. These are, or at least claim to be, directly backed by an equivalent amount of fiat currency dollars, mostly, or maybe very safe, liquid assets like U.S. Treasury bills, all held in reserve somewhere. The idea is simple. For every one stablecoin out there, there's supposed to be $1 or something very close to it sitting in a bank. Tether, USDT, and USD coin, USDC, are the big examples here.
Ah, Tether. Right. I have heard some rumblings, some concerns about its backing.
Yeah, you're right to bring that up. USDT is the biggest stablecoin out there, but it's faced these long-standing doubts about its reserves. Are they really fully backed? How transparent are they? Historically, they weren't always holding just cash, one-to-one. They held things like commercial paper, which is basically unsecured short-term debt from companies. Imagine like a bank promising you cash anytime, but instead of holding all cash, they're holding a bunch of IOUs from different businesses.
Yep.
If those businesses struggle, or if everyone suddenly wants their money back, a massive run, the bank might not have the actual dollars ready. That's the fear with Tether.
That does sound serious, especially when you think about the Bible's call for honesty. Leviticus 19 talks about honest and true measures. For people
Yeah.
to trust this, it really needs that transparency, doesn't it?
Exactly. That principle of honesty is fundamental. And to be fair, Tether says it's been working on this. They claim they're holding more U.S. Treasury bills now, less commercial paper. Their CTO, Paolo Ardoino, also pointed out they recently handled over $7 billion in redemptions in just 48 hours without any problems. So they showed some resilience there. But that initial lack of clarity, it definitely created a trust issue that's kind of hard to shake completely.
7 billion in 48 hours is huge. But okay, even with the ones considered more compliant, like USDC, have there been wobbles? Did we see other risks pop up?
We certainly did. Even USDC, which is generally seen as highly compliant, it temporarily lost its peg back in March 2023. It dropped to about, 87, 88 cents? And that wasn't because of its reserves directly, but because a chunk of those reserves were held at Silicon Valley Bank when it collapsed. So it really highlighted how even these fiat-backed coins aren't totally immune. They're still connected to risks in the traditional financial system. It reminds you of that verse in Proverbs, right? Proverbs 22.3. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. You have to look at risk from all sides.
That's a really important point for anyone using these. Okay, what about the other type you mentioned, the algorithmic ones?
Right, algorithmic stablecoins. These are a totally different kettle of fish. They don't rely on reserves of dollars or T-bills at all. Instead, they use these complex algorithms, often paired with a second sister coin, to try and maintain their peg. The theory is, if the stablecoin's price dips, the algorithm automatically does things like creating more of the sister coin or taking the stablecoin out of circulation to push the price back up to $1. It's an attempt really to engineer stability just using code and market incentives without needing huge piles of collateral.
And I have a feeling this is where Terra USD or UST fits into the story.
You got it. Terra USD. It's the poster child for when this goes wrong. In 2022, it spectacularly didn't hold up to its promise, as they say. It got caught in this death spiral, this vicious circle. UST started falling, which caused the price of its sister coin, Luna, to fall. People panicked, sold both, which made both fall even faster. UST collapsed down to just 12 cents. It basically evaporated. And that event just massively shook investors' faith in that whole model and definitely set off alarm bells for global regulators everywhere. It showed how fragile that algorithmic approach can be under pressure, really underscores that need for prudence.
Wow, yeah. That UST crash sounds like it really forced regulators to pay attention. So where are we now with regulation? How's that shaping things?
Well, there's definitely a sense of urgency. Larisa Yerovoya, a finance professor, she emphasizes how tricky these things are to police and points out that when they often fail fastly. Their lifespans can be very short. Regulators are worried they could become systemically important, too big to fail, kind of like Lehman Brothers back in 2008. The complexity means the risks aren't always obvious until it's, well, too late.
That's a pretty stark comparison. So what concrete steps are being taken, especially in the U.S.?
In the U.S., there was the Genius Act, passed in June 2025. That's a pretty big deal. It defines stablecoins specifically as electronic payment mediums, importantly, not as investment products. It also bans paying interest to users, which kind of discourages risky behavior to attract funds. But the core part is mandating 100% reserves held in federally insured banks and only in cash or short-term treasury bills. No risky stuff like Bitcoin or commercial stocks allowed in the reserves. Plus, they need monthly reserve reports and annual audits. It's all about forcing that transparency and stability, aligning with that biblical call for honesty we talked about.
That sounds really thorough, trying to integrate them properly into the existing banking system, it seems. What's the likely effect of something like that?
Well, it could really speed up the adoption of the compliant stablecoins, the ones that follow the rules, give them a solid, trustworthy foundation. It might also put pressure on the offshore ones like USDT. They might have to comply with these stricter rules or face having their access to the US dollar system restricted, their reserves potentially frozen to protect users. It's a move towards making sure these tools are true and honorable, operating accountably.
Interesting. And are other places taking different routes? What about in Asia, say Hong Kong?
Yeah, different regions have different focuses. Hong Kong is using a model they call sandbox regulation plus tiered licensing. They have these 3C principles: capital adequacy, making sure they have enough funds, collateral transparency, being clear about what's backing them, and compliance operation operating legally. They've already had some success. There's a Hong Kong dollar stablecoin, JHKD, from JD Technology and local banks. In a pilot, it processed over 50 billion Hong Kong dollars in cross-border payments. And get this, it cut costs by 60% and made settlements instant. Shows what's possible with a clear framework that also, serves the public good by making things cheaper and faster.
Wow, 60% cost reduction is significant. But with all these different approaches globally, does that create problems for using stablecoins across borders?
It actually can. The Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, they worry about fragmentation risk. You've got the U.S. maybe focusing more on compliance, the EU on consumer protection, emerging markets on monetary control. It leads to different rules everywhere. This can create multi-layered regulatory barriers when stablecoins try to move internationally, which, ironically, can add back costs and complexity instead of removing them. Harmonizing all this globally is a real challenge.
Right, so regulation is a double-edged sword, in some ways necessary for trust, but potentially creating friction if it's not coordinated.
Okay, despite these hurdles, how is the technology itself evolving? Are stablecoins still just about payments, or are they doing more?
Oh, they're moving way beyond just simple payments. Some are calling them digital economic orchestrators. The underlying tech is getting much more sophisticated. Take USDC, for example. It now works across 12 different public blockchains. That means you can send it almost instantly between different networks. Huge for interoperability.
12 chains, wow. What about things like privacy and speed for really big commercial uses? Good questions. For privacy, that Hong Kong dollar coin, JHKD, uses something called zero-knowledge proofs, or ZK privacy. It's pretty clever cryptography. It lets you prove something is true, like, yes, this transaction is valid, without revealing all the sensitive details behind it. Think of proving you're over 21 without showing your actual birthday. It gives users privacy, but still allows regulators to check things if needed. It's a neat balance. And for speed, some newer projects are using different tech, like directed acyclic graphs, DDAGs. These can handle massive throughput, think over 10,000 transactions per second. Perfect for large-scale business payments where speed is critical.
And I heard AI is getting involved too. That sounds fascinating. How does that work? How does AI make things better for, say, me buying something online in euros with my dollar card?
Yeah, AI is really changing the game here, creating much smoother experiences. AI agents can work behind the scenes, automating the whole cross-currency settlement using stablecoins. So for you, the user, it just looks seamless. You buy your euro goods with your USD card, and the AI handles the cheapest, fastest stablecoin conversion route in the background. Could cut costs by like 40%. AI can also pick the best stablecoin for a transaction based on your habits or current exchange rates. And for security, Circle is using AI, specifically GPT-4 models, to monitor USDC transactions for risk. They're getting like 99.2% accuracy in spotting fraud.
That is genuinely incredible. It really sounds like stablecoins are breaking out of just the crypto niche. Where else are we seeing them used? In more traditional industries.
Absolutely. They're spreading out, showing real potential for public benefit. Look at supply chain finance. Big names like Foxconn and Amazon are trying out USDC to pay their global suppliers. Instead of waiting 90 days for payment, suppliers get paid instantly. It cuts financing costs by around 15%, or cross-border e-commerce. Shein, the fashion retailer, is using JHKD to make payments easier and more successful for buyers in Southeast Asia. Opens up markets, even in carbon trading. The EU's carbon market plans to bring in euro stablecoins, EURT, by late 2025. The idea is instant settlement for carbon credits, making that market more efficient. You see how this aligns with those biblical calls? Micah 6.8, acts justly and to love mercy, and Galatians 6.near, do good to all people. This tech can be used for good.
It truly is revolutionary tech with such broad potential, which brings us right back to our core focus today. Viewing all this, the innovation, the risks, the potential, through a Christian lens, how do we approach that?
Yeah. It's the vital question, isn't it? Stablecoins are, without doubt, an innovative achievement. They offer these unprecedented opportunities, global payments, settlement, bringing more people into the financial system. But, as we've seen, there are risks. Decoupling, regulation issues, ethical tests. So from a Christian standpoint, the essence here is stewardship. We created this technology. It's an extension of the stewardship God gave us. And therefore, it absolutely must be based on principles like honesty, justice, prudence, ensuring it serves human well-being and ultimately glorifies God. The Bible actually gives us pretty clear guidance here.
Stewardship, that's a powerful way to frame it. How do we apply that biblical wisdom specifically to stablecoins?
Well, first off, honesty and transparency. We touched on this with Tether and Leviticus. Trust is everything. So USDC's model of 100% reserves plus regular audits, that's a good example of building trust through being open and compliant. It aligns with wanting honest measures. As Christians, we should support clear rules, like the Genius Act, that push for that kind of integrity. Then there's prudence and wisdom. Proverbs warns us about seeing danger and taking refuge. We saw the dangers with Terra USD. Even the USDC DPEG showed systemic risk. So Christian wisdom says, support strict reserve rules, support careful management, don't just rush in blindly. Handle these tools with foresight.
And they have such potential to impact people, especially those on the margins. How do we ensure they promote justice and inclusivity?
That's exactly where we focus on their public welfare potential. Their low cost and speed can be a huge boost for financial inclusion, helping the unbanked. Imagine using them for more efficient humanitarian aid or getting education funds where they're needed quickly. So promoting them means making them accessible, maybe through tech that hides the complexity, like lossless payment where you don't need to be a crypto expert. And it also means ensuring fair competition, not letting one or two players dominate and exclude others. It's about making sure the benefits serve all people, reflecting that call to justice and mercy.
That makes a lot of sense. And the last big challenge with anything involving money is always greed. How do we address that in this context?
A crucial point. 1 Timothy 6.2 is the stark reminder. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. So we have to actively guard against pure speculation, against just chasing profits above all else. This means supporting regulations that prevent illicit uses of money laundering, tax evasion, and that discourage overly aggressive, cutthroat competition. As stewards, Christians should be looking to support and use stablecoin projects that are compliant, transparent, and focused on creating real, long-term value and service, not just quick bucks. It's about using them virtuously.
This really provides a solid ethical framework for engaging with this technology. So is there one guiding principle that sort of wraps all this up? How should we think about these things?
I think Philippians 4.8 says it perfectly. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, think about these things.
Mhm.
That should be our filter. Does this stablecoin project, does this application align with what is true, honorable, just, pure? If we apply those principles, stablecoins can become tools that genuinely glorify God and contribute to justice and peace in society. As God's stewards, we have a role to play in guiding their development that way.
That's a really powerful and practical application of scripture to cutting-edge technology. So just to wrap up, stablecoins are a major financial innovation, offering huge opportunities but also bringing significant ethical challenges. Navigating this requires us to be grounded in those core principles: honesty, justice, prudence, and service. And that brings us to a question for you, our listener. As stewards of God's resources, how might you engage with emerging financial technologies like stablecoins in ways that truly honor God and serve others? Thank you for listening. See you next time.